Is that displaying?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
And recording.
And recording. All right. Okay. So coming up, so I'm mixing it up a bit because I'm getting really bored of the same format. So apologies if you're seeing this for the first time, but I'm mixing it up because why not? So coming up very soon, we've got Alastair and Dan who are going to do two really awesome presentations. No pressure. So managed identities, looking under the hood, and we've got building an AI RAG app with logic apps. Both of these I'm super interested in, and you're going to have to wait because before that you've got to listen to me for a little bit. So this is being recorded. These microphones pick it up really well. It's worth noting that we do have a record attendance on Teams tonight, so that's pretty cool.
Welcome to everybody on Teams.
We got 5, so it's a record. Brisbane Azure User Group, if you're here for something else, that's unfortunate. This is March 2025, so before we get into it, we're going to put a big thank you out there to our sponsors, so Codify and Microsoft. Thank you very much. Codify provide all the drinks, Microsoft the venue. If you're online, you just get virtual drinks. So enjoy as many as you want.
Within reason.
Within reason, yeah. We don't want to go too crazy. All right, so getting involved. This is a community group, so we want to hear from people in the community. We have a huge membership. We don't have as big a turnout as a membership. I think there's like over 2,500. Luckily, because they wouldn't fit in this room. But if you have something to share with the community, if you've got something that you've been doing in Azure and you want to share it, this is the place. So let us know. We've got plenty of spots available later in the year. Yeah, want to hear from you guys. There's an email there. Throw it to that email. That'd be fantastic. Only a couple of really noteworthy updates. There was a lot of little things, and I'm sorry if you're here for those little things, you're not going to hear it because I have to like screen them out. They're not that interesting. But there are a few things. So starting off, object replication for block blobs. Anyone use this? Anyone heard of this? Not many. Okay, that's good. So it came out, originally announced in 2021, a long time ago. This is if you want to replicate data from one of your Azure storage accounts to another one. This is a great capability. It's been going for a while. There's been some requests into like seeing a little bit more details about what's going on. And so there's 2 new metrics that are coming out for this. And that's the operations pending for replication and the bytes pending for replication. So this does not happen real time. It's not synchronous. It's asynchronous. For example, the operations pending for replication can be broken down into, hours, 24 hours, and then it's like weeks and even more, depending upon how big your replication is. So it's not necessarily the fastest thing in the world, but you can now actually see what's going on and take corrective measures.
So what would you use that as a global replication?
It's a good question.
You get read access from the other account, and it can be in a different subscription.
It is a different subscription. That is a good point. Yeah. So and different tenants in you. So, this gives you some extra.
It's saying like the whole storage account I had on. So.
Well, they're pretty cheap.
Yeah. Most deletes at this time.
So do deletions get replicated as well?
I didn't think it copies permission, so I think he puts it out.
Yeah. When I looked at it a while back, that was what was entertaining me, that there'd be another bit somewhere else. Actually, it's trivial just for a website that have static content and be in a different place. Pseudo CDN, but doesn't.
Yeah. So this one here confused me for a long time. So the short of it is there's some new features in standard bolted backup. So bolted backup for standard happened a while back. They've announced it in the updates, and it sounded like it's a new thing for standard, but no, it's just parts of the standard have been upgraded, and in particular, you can now no arrow, but you can actually opt in for bolted standard with that policy. So that's good. We got some new VMs come out. So D and E family, obviously it's the same sort of thing. It's better performance than the previous generation, more power. So there's a bit of a graph to show you how it compares. The data movement library, for those of you who write C# code. So there's a new version of the data movement library that's come out. Namespaces have changed a little bit, and there's a few things like that. So if you're using that, that's a really good thing. Azure Private DNS fallback to the internet. So those of you who are doing private DNS and having some complications with that, well, this will now fall back that DNS to the public address. So there are some scenarios where that might be what you're after. So I did want to mention this. We've got a bicep hackathon. Yep. So hack with upgrade. Do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, so essentially what we do is we get it's hosted by Hudson, actually in partnership with BOQ as well this time around. And we, so if you haven't met Lucas before, you can chat to Lucas about this as well. Essentially we get a bunch of people together and we throw, I think it's nearly 20 challenges at them this time around in Bicep, and they have to solve the challenges in order to get to the next one. And then, it grades them. So like it tells them whether they completed the challenge successfully or not.
Not with AI grading, is it?
Not AI grading, no. Personally write the test to see if they met the objective or not. So it's a lot of fun, and whether you know Bicep well or not, it's pretty it's a good test of your skills and allows you to learn new skills as well. We've got a little bit of PS rule on there for Bernie's sake this time around. PS rules. So it should be fun.
Brilliant.
Long project. Yeah.
Lots of like-minded people that are just all there to learn and grow. So.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. A couple of resources that you've seen before: the Slack, the YouTube, some training resources, and some blogs. All right. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Alastair.
And
A different type of hand. I thought I was really quick with that, though.
take that. Oh, you might want the. Here we go. If you want to
It's
use
a Linux box. I don't understand.
want to use it.
I've got a mouse, so
Oh, you got. Okay, that's all right.
might do.
Keep on shooting in your ear.
I'm not sure if you get another hand at the end, so you might have done all of your.
We're going to spring to life.
yes.
Lost the screen.
Just plug it in and it works.
Yeah, we don't have any technical issues.
Never ever.
Did you say that was Linux?
Yes.
Yeah. What does that one do?
You go.
Flying solo.
Edge compute.
Always does wonders for your public speaking confidence when the technology fails you. First step.
At the very beginning.
Yeah.
Now I'm seeing a totally different desktop. What's going on here?
This is not your secret desktop, is it?
Oh, look at that. Multi-screen.
That looks all right.
Right. Get the script. Get the beer. Okay. So, managed identities. Thank you for the introduction. As at the beginning of the talk, I'm Alastair Wilkinson. I'm a Senior Security Analyst. I had to think about that at Griffith University, and a background of just over 3 decades in the industry. Before cybersecurity was a thing, but I've been working in cybersecurity for the last more years than I care to mention. This is one of the user groups I do frequent regularly. Mostly the OWASP group, some of the cybersecurity ones, but I'm a regular here. As ever, quick acknowledgement. Shoulders what I've stood on in the past. Wayne, if you'd been here, your name was on the last time I presented.
Yes, I actually watched that.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, I caught it up.
So my immediate team at Griffith Uni, all awesome people. Tim Kay, the software engineer at Boeing, was here last time I presented. Michelle Van Ingen, Jan is at Griffith Uni. They all helped me with the Python coding for this because I'm not a developer. As ever, John Saville, my go-to, and I'm trying to learn Azure stuff. Love his presentation and many, many others. I think we are a community. It's very important that we acknowledge the people who support us. And I've had a lot of support out of this group, so many thanks for that. As ever, my talks involve the patron saint of live demos. It certainly isn't, although we're looking at slides at the moment, it certainly isn't death by PowerPoint or Google Slides in this case. So there's a demo coming. If I go to, let's go to the right place. I've deployed because it's given me some issues in the past and timed out. That's an Azure web app. I just ran. If we go, that command. Normally we do this sort of thing in DevOps. Sorry, can you see that?
Yeah.
I won't wrestle with making it bigger. So that's just I want to kill that. There we go. Deployed before the start because I didn't want to be wrestling with a timeout and having to run it again during the talk. So a little bit of cheating. There's some more deployment to come. And possibly we'll be multi-cloud gurus at the end of this talk as well. Anyway, back to the slides. So normally those deployments would be DevOps, but for the purposes of illustration, we're not going to do them from GitHub Actions or equivalent. Do them in real time on the command line. This talk actually came from a discussion with Damien and Dan and a plan several months ago. We said, let's do a talk on integrating Azure logs with SIEM, Splunk. And I thought that'd be good. I'll write something interesting to generate some logs. And they went off on a tangent. I thought I'll do an API. I'll do some authentication against it. I'll use some managed identities. I'll do calls to key vaults. And didn't that go off on a tangent that led to this talk before? So the Splunk talk is going to come, but it would have been about 4 hours long. We've got to included all this stuff. And there was enough in here I thought that's interesting. So all of this is just came out of, well, I didn't know it would do that. As I figured out what was going on. I said I did a fair bit of learning of Python Flask, but I do most of the go-to for my work is Python. So that was interesting and work-related and valuable. And hence asking various software engineers and developers for help because I got quite stuck in some of it. But there's some interesting stuff in here before you get to let's ingest this into a SIEM and Splunk. And we'll come to what that is for anyone who doesn't know in a few months' time in another talk, maybe. Right, managed identities, the subject of tonight. Could I have, and there's no showing, quick show of hands here, who's knows what they are, first of all, in who'd say they're pretty familiar with, they've used them at work, so fair few. Having seen the sharp hands of most of you know, we're still going to use the ASD's definition, even though when I copied and pasted those words, I still think they're incorrect, but they're a good definition. The managed identities are like service accounts, allowing resources that support, and this is they say support AD, not AAD or Entra. The Australian Signals Directorate say AD, but apart from that, authentication to access one another, but eliminating the need to manage these credentials. So what are we trying to solve here? And we're talking about DevOps earlier and GitHub Actions and equivalent. Probably the main thing we're trying to solve is not having to move secrets around or handle secrets in our code, which is very, very important. Absolutely terrible place to put any kind of secret. And even without a managed identity, if you use things like environment variables or put your secret somewhere else, you're still somewhat chicken and egg. Say you need an environment variable to get to a key vault, you're still accessing something to get the secret to go to your sensitive data. So managed identities are a mechanism to get around, to avoid having to handle secrets in your code. If you're a machine talking to a machine, for example. The ASD explains it better than me, apart from they don't say Entra, they say Active Directory. Onwards there's two types, system managed and user managed. Quick summary of those. System managed, you create via the resource and has a one-to-one relationship with that resource. And that's going to be part of the demo later. I'll show you creating one to show you where it appears in Intro. There are swings and roundabouts to both system managed and user managed. I'll come back to those. User managed is an Azure resource in its own right. You create it as an Azure resource and you assign it as an identity to, typically it's some form of compute. In the case of the demo I'm going to do tonight, it's going to be a web app, might be a function app, might be a virtual machine. But we get bored of demos that use virtual machines. Then I'm going to use one later on for some of it. System managed, I say, a one-to-one. You have one identity to your single resource. So it doesn't work with things like VM scale sets. It doesn't work with multiples. Similarly, if you're in a larger environment, you might have some separation of authority. You might find your identity team don't want to give access to do things to a series of often third-party devs. And that can make system managed identities hard to work with CI/CD pipelines. Because you don't necessarily want your devs being able to assign credentials to resources and do things in your your identity provider. So you'll find in bigger environments where there's a separation of responsibilities that user managed identities are more common. Very snazzy thing about system managed, I'll say if you're a bit disorganized and don't have processes, is at the end of the life cycle of the resource, if you've gotten rid of the resource, the identity goes as well. And that's actually really sneaky. It's very handy to not leave dangling identities. User managed do the opposite. If you assign a user managed identity to, common use case, something hosting a website, a VMware web app, talking to a database, at the end of its life cycle, if that web app, that virtual machine is gone, the identity still has the permissions. And we're going to touch on that in demo, where you can get to resources using a managed identity that even no longer exists. And that's possible even with a system manager. We'll go through that. Now, I said about under the hood, and I was figuring out initially for what gets logged and what doesn't get logged. And that's interesting. We'll come to that. And I thought, well, I'll do some research. And I've mentioned John Saville because this is very much plagiarized. So I have to again acknowledge that. The documentation is somewhat lighter of what's going on under the hood. I couldn't find a better explanation and a fair amount of research. So the link there, I'd definitely watch if you're interested in this area, John Saville's video about it. I'm sure he explains it a lot better than I'm about to try to. But basically, I'm referencing IMD Instance Metadata Service and Managed Identity Resource Provider. And there's a grabbing of a certificate and an issuing of a token. And if we go on one page, this is, again, a plagiarism totally. Credit to John Saville of one of his whiteboards in a YouTube video. And his explanation of what's going on. I couldn't find a better explanation. I said in a lot of research. And essentially, we take an example of VM. This seems to apply for almost all forms of compute. It very much follows this model, but I've used this example of a virtual machine in this case because I'm plagiarizing John Saville. So the VM talks to the Instance Metadata Service, and we'll show that working in some of the demo stuff we do later. Hey, can I get a token? I want to access something. Instance Metadata Service goes to the Managed Identity Resource Provider. And it says, hey, this guy wants a token. Which will then hand back. They look okay. Here's their ID and certificate. At that point, IMDS will go to Entra and say, hey, we know who this is. There's an existing certificate for this identity proving they are who they claim to be. Can I get a token to allow this identity to access the resources they've been given permission to? And we're going to use that token later because it's interesting what can and can't be done with it. Entra will send back a token and give the access token to, in this case, the virtual machine, or in our case, later on in demo, it's going to be a web app, because it's usually some form of compute. So in the spirit of not having death by slides, thanks to Cyclone Alfred, the demo prep was slightly unfinished. So I'm operating in a branch, as I'll show you in a minute. So there might be audience participation and some fault findings, but that's the important thing in meetings such as this. Sorry, what was that?
A lot of branches filled in.
Yes. So it's Python Flask, which is a web application framework. I'm going to do a very basic API. It really is just a series of gets. At this stage, there's no authentication or authorization against it. That I'm going to look to incorporate by the time it becomes a, how do we get this stuff into Splunk? But hey, I've got a bit of learning to do before then. And we're going to do a very common use case. We're just going to get a secret out of a key vault. Okay, next slide. See, very, very simple setup. So we're going to query an API. The API has access to a key vault, and it might use that to get to something that needs access to secret. I don't know, MySQL database, something like that, but we haven't factored that in. We're just going to get the secret. And I'm so going to put multi-cloud guru on my resume. The reason for just throwing an AWS EC2 instance out there is it's something that's, I was testing the access and I realized it was always working because I was authenticated in my own shell to Azure. And so I wasn't doing a realistic test of what I could access. I was using, it was, instead of accessing via a token stolen from a managed identity, I was accessing as an owner of a subscription. And I thought, what an idiot. So I needed something that was basically off the laptop and show there's nothing up my sleeves. And that's the gist of the demo. So let us, without further ado, as I said, we've already deployed an Azure web app, just done from shell.azure.com. We have resource group for a web app and resource group for a key vault. So that already exists. If we go to, I'm used to doing this on 2 screens, drag Postman. Everyone not familiar with Postman, used for testing APIs? Basically think of it as a snazzy browser that's going to make API calls, which you can see. There's our web app. There's a particular API endpoint. And all my app does, can we see the code? It uses the Python faker app and generates a few fake identities. That in itself is interesting because when I was testing this and developing it, I have seen the names of at least 2 people I know crop up through Python faker. I'm quite suspicious. And I've tried to research that. How does Python faker produce names? And that, again, is poorly documented, or else I'm poor at research, which is also possible. So we have a number of identities. That's not in a database. I just throw them into a Python dictionary, which, again, is a very early stage dev. What? You just want to test some code. Don't set up a database and just, you're going to suck it into a dictionary somewhere. So that's all it is. There's nothing clever under the hood in there. But we've got some API endpoints to test. We can find an individual. And there's some personal data, date of birth, name, tax file number. I think in one of the branches I've got of this, I'm doing a passport number as well to make it really sensitive, really kind of Medibanky type thing. Just so we've got interesting things to log and detect in the scene later on. Now, it's really thrown me having 2 screens. We have, get up there, mouse. A number of endpoints in our app. Not uncommon is to leave a bit of testing code in the dev area. So we've used a bit of license and we're going to, oh, huzzah, try something in our Postman. And this is not going to work. We have code to get a managed identity token, which we need to know that works, and testing that either using web browser or curl, or in this case, it's actually built into the Python code of our web app to go, hey, get me a token. So this will fail. And because we control the web server, we've got our own message. Now that's failing because at this point in time, we haven't assigned any identity. We just got a web app. There's no identity assigned to it. So there's no token to go and get. That's an important one. Does that make sense to everybody? Have I explained that to you? I can see mainly nods. That's good. Shout if not, if my explanations are bad.
Can you show the code?
Yes. We go back to here. Now that is in, come here. So that's Python Flask to get, grab a token. What we're doing is we're grabbing the environment variables of the web app and which make up the URI of the IMDS endpoint. If you can think back to my diagram, we go and grab that from 169, whatever the IDMS endpoint, IP address, non-routable IP address, and make the calls in there. It will go through the process that I described, plagiarized from John Saville, and it will come back with an access token. And if you, oh, sorry.
I was just, when you're ready, Alastair, but I was thinking that it might help to explain what the IMDS service is, because probably most people won't.
IMDS. if we do IMDS Instant Metadata Service is trying to think that using the word service. A service on a non-routable 169 IP address, and honestly, I can't remember what the other octets are, that a resource with a managed identity can call to and request information about itself and what it can do, including making, as I described, the token request, which will go through that process and go off to Entra. Would have been a good idea if I'd had a 169 and done some other calls and had it prepped, but I don't. So does that very basic explanation make sense? Think of an HTTP service that the resource can query about itself and make requests for access about itself as well. AWS has a very, very similar thing, another non-routable service. Is that makes sense?
Probably the only thing that I would add would be it's basically a HTTP endpoint that Microsoft hosts, and it's built into the Azure fabric. So like all services, all compute services effectively have access to it. And then what actually appears on that API endpoint is sort of depending on how the service is, what it's configured, and whether it has managed identities or not, then you'll get obviously different responses. But it's essentially just a service that then each resource can query, and whether you only choose to query it, that's sort of up to you.
Good explanation. Thank you.
So who actually manages, who puts the data in there?
Microsoft.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's 169 non-routable address. You can only access it from the resource itself. What I'm going to show in the demo is once you've gotten that token, that can go anywhere. But the IMDS itself is only accessible from within Azure Compute Resources. Again, had I been better prepared, I would have spun up a VM or a shell, and we'd have gone HTTP 169 endpoint and seen various things about that particular resource.
And the purpose of that is to secure a copy of that. Or what's the purpose of that? To be accessed by you first, and then to.
No, it's more to. I'm going to ask Bernie for.
Yeah, I guess. So imagine you're a service that lives within Azure.
Yes.
One, how do you even know that you're in Azure? How do you know maybe what your host name is, or how do you know that you're in
like your profile in other services, like your profile?
Yeah, it's basically like that. So it's basically a profile about the actual resource, but then it's all networking and like low level stuff. But it's effectively, how do I know who I am? Because I could be hosted anywhere, and some vendor services actually use it to determine, am I hosted on Azure or AWS or on premises? But effectively, it gives some core information about how is it plugged into Azure. So yeah.
Like a who am I for Azure?
Yeah.
Like in case I lose my identity, I go there and find it.
Not really if you lose identity. It allows the resource to find out about itself and where it is. If I do this talk again, I'll have something ready to go with the control commands. So apologies for that. Hadn't anticipated that one. Now, where are we?
Cyber engineering, but like, oh, why would you use any other cloud when Azure's so good?
Okay, so I lost my channel. What we need to do is go to our web apps in our resource group. So we couldn't get a token. We will be able to query some other parts of the IMDS, but we can't get a token from it because we haven't actually given it an identity yet. It's just a web app. Now, we're not going to use a user assigned. We're just going to use a system assigned here. The principles of what we're going to show in the demo are exactly the same. And it saves me cleaning up at the end, because when I blow away the resource group, which I'm actually going to do in here, then this identity will go. So we're going to turn that on. And we'll save that. And whilst that says it's enabled, it does take a couple of minutes to allow us to go and query and get to a key vault. So we're going to talk amongst ourselves what we are going to do.
Can you show the environment variables?
Yes, because I've got an endpoint that will do it.
No, on your web app. Sorry, your app configuration.
Yes, when it's in a couple of
the configuration parameters in your web app, that the environment variables that you're reading in.
Yes, I've got an endpoint that does it.
Oh, okay. You're not going to show it through the GUI, through the form. The web app itself.
Oh, I don't know how to do that.
I'll just go to the web app. It's on the side.
Under, or was it configuration or something? Absolutely. I always forget which one it is. Yeah.
Cancel your search.
Cancel that one. Where are we going?
Oh. Yeah, it's one I've never seen the identity one before.
So these are ones that you put in, right? And so what are the values of those variables? You go show value.
Those aren't the ones I use.
Okay. Connections? Oh, it's not a connection.
No.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
We go to.
There is nothing stored with a managed identity.
No, I was just seeing that you were actually reading it from environment variables. You're reading.
Yeah. Oh, you can certainly read those.
Oh, I see what you meant. That was actually in the Flask app.
Yeah. Rather than hard coding, I'm pulling them out of the app.
Didn't you have a URL there as well that you were reading?
Well, let's go back to here.
Yeah, identity endpoint.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
That's obviously being published by Microsoft into your app.
Ah,
Once you enable the managed identity, it has to be.
You asked about identity endpoint, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll just be an environment variable.
That
Microsoft puts in.
that Microsoft puts in that you're not putting in.
Yeah, I don't care. I query Microsoft for that. So
Okay.
That's not visible in the portal. I never actually realized that until you just pointed it out.
I'd never even looked in the portal for it.
Yeah.
I'd always found I've kind of figured that out from reading the Docker and using curl commands, because you can get to a bash shell for a Linux Python web app.
Yep.
And in the figuring out for this, which did take me a fair bit of figuring out how to make that work, I was just hitting curl commands into bash and seeing what would work. So I didn't know it was even visible in there.
But it's not visible in the portal, is it? Which is interesting. I wonder how many other. It's like 65. I was like, all right.
What other things can be dropped in endpoint? Well, be careful who you're allowed to make commits to your repos is one of the takeaways. If we go back to Postman, and this is fun because we're just flowing beautifully. If we go, I think that's the endpoint. So that's the code we just had. That's what it pulls out of the app. Essentially, we're just using the Python OS module because it's just compute and going, hey, what are these environment variables? Python just thinks it's running on a computer.
Yeah.
And that's what's used to construct the URI to go and grab the token. Now, we've easily covered a couple of minutes while that starts to fully work, but branching out quickly. Entra.
So can I ask a quick question to the group?
Mm.
I struggle with knowing when whatever that replication is that occurs when you enable a managed identity. I always struggle with knowing when that's done. Like you could just throw a sleep in there for like 5 minutes and hope that it's done after it. Have you ever? Has anyone else ever like worked out a test that you can do to see.
Other than testing whether the identity is actually working, I haven't got one. It normally seems to be about 2 minutes before it's fully available.
Yeah,
I haven't got one to.
and it's a bit random as well. Like not exactly 2 minutes every time. Yeah.
I can't see a log event that. There might be something in the web app logs. I haven't looked hard enough. It certainly generates, if you do look at the web app logs, it certainly generates events there, but I haven't figured out which one says, hey, it's working. If we look for something called web, I'm glad that worked. Again, in this was going to be done in PowerShell. Because you can see quite a lot more information, but I'm blaming Cyclone now for I didn't have time to write that bit. So we're doing it in the GUI. So managed by Microsoft, we've now got an identity. And if I'd come in here early, before I assign that identity to the web app, you wouldn't have seen that. I'm going to blow away the web app as part. You'll see it disappear as well. So we do have an identity in Azure, which appears under the enterprise applications. So essentially, it's a special form of service principle. And the loggings in, remember this talk came out of, hey, what logs did we get? No user interactive ones. Nothing yet. But what we're going to do is we're now going to grab a token. And we haven't actually gone and got our secret out of the key vault yet. And this is really code that shouldn't be in our repo, but would very commonly drop a function in the dev world to say, why doesn't this work? Ominously long delay. Bizarre. Patent change demo. So we've got an access token. Now, note, we've got an access token, but if you think of our, I go back to here. I don't know how we're doing for time, Dan. I'm on a roll, sorry. What we've deployed, we've assigned an identity to our web app, but we haven't given any permissions. It's got no access. We haven't given, the identity has only just been created. We haven't given it permission to get anything out of the key vault. But we've got an access token, which is interesting because we've got an identity that hasn't got access to anything, but we've got an access token. Just hold that thought. So if we actually try to go and get a secret.
That's why I like the identity tokens better. Access tokens smart.
That's they suck. Just when you use them, be aware of them. What they can and can't do. If we now go, just change that one. Got an endpoint here. You wouldn't leave an endpoint that does this in prod, but it's immensely useful when you troubleshoot. And it's not going to work because we haven't given any permissions to our identity to the key vault. So let's do that and see what happens. We're going to loop back to Azure resource groups. I've got a key vault. We've got a secret. And we're using RBAC permissions so we can get right down to the secret level. And we're going to grant some permissions in here. Add. All about principal least privilege. It's going to be secret user.
It's like a keyboard illustrator.
And here's the pointy end. So we're going to assign key vault secret user to our managed identity. And there we go. And we actually have to make polite conversation for 30 to 60 seconds. That's not quite instantaneous. It's faster than previously. But what we're going to do in that time is I'm going to bring yet another window up here. Multi-cloud guru, fist punching moment. This is a really, really basic AWS deploy, and that's only because I wanted to be able to say multi-cloud guru standing in front of you all here. But also, it's going to be a completely new VM with a completely new shell, nothing connected to Azure, and we're going to throw a token into that and see what we can do with it. So,
you're going to steal the token, are you?
yes.
Okay, that's cool.
So we'll deploy that, and that will kill the time for us to go to Postman and go Azure, working as designed. So we've now been through, we've assigned an identity to our web app. We've assigned permissions to that identity, principal least privilege, to our key vault, and we've made a call where we can retrieve that secret. And in the real world in prod, we wouldn't display it as an API endpoint. We'd use it to do something useful. But this isn't the real world. And we very commonly end up with functions like this left in dev code. Believe me, because I've seen it. So we've got that now. This talk came out of how could we see this being misused in Splunk? I keep talking about Splunk. I'm going to have another show of hands. When I say the term SIEM, Security Incident and Event Management, and Splunk, who's familiar, not familiar there? And I'll just explain why I keep banging on about it.
Disagree.
Fewer people.
Familiar, not familiar. Which one are we supposed to raise our hands for?
Either. So essentially,
I'm familiar or not familiar.
if you're familiar.
Yeah.
You can only if you buy the module, but Splunk is not C.
Oh no, but used as a SIEM, yes.
Yeah, everyone does, but you should.
It's Sentinel's so good. Why
would you use anything else?
It predates Sentinel. It's a big ask for a big organisation to change log ingestion.
But you don't need to, because I think I've discovered your security weakness. It's the API.
Very much so. Yes.
Just remember the password.
It's long. It's got a symbol and
Well,
so, anyway. So, in short, the interest is also when we get hideous dev work like this, which obviously never happens. What are we logging and what can we detect on? So let us go back to, and this did interest me, and it makes sense. It surprised me at first, but it made sense. Where is my log? So we've got the sign-in log here. Now we've used our identity to actually go and do something. We've got an event, a sign-in event. Our identity has been issued with a token that lasts for 24 hours. So, proved experimentally, you won't necessarily see it tonight. If we go back there to our endpoint and we go.
When was that logged? Was it when you got the token or when you used the token to access the key vault?
From noting times before, it's when you first get the token,
Yep.
that event is logged.
Then it's cached in.
And it's with the web app and it's valid for 24 hours. And there's a Microsoft fact about this I'm going to cover later on with the lifetime when it tries to renew. But no matter how many times in the next 24 hours we do that, we won't get another log entry.
It's only retrieval.
Because it's been to our identity has been to Entra.
Yeah.
It said, hey, I'm through to IAM, give me a token. It's now just using that token.
Yeah.
So we don't get another log entry in Entra. And we're going to come back to that because this came out of what we're seeing in logs and being able to detect security events that we might not want to see, or we want to see, but we shouldn't be seeing. So we can go like that, no end of times, and we won't get another login entry and entry and enter, including if we go back and look at our token. This is just a JSON web token. We can look at it. It's just base 64 encoding. Where are we? Let's blow that one away. So JWTI, just handy website for information about use of, I don't know why it's pronounced JOT. That just seems mad to me, but it is apparently. Various information. The bit we're interested in, or I'm interested in, an expiry and epoch time. And there's chocolates. Running even can tell me how to do this in PowerShell because I don't know.
Just hover over it.
So that's the expiry. And I should have said, what's the time, Mr. Wolf, when we first went and grabbed the token? But it would have been 24 hours before that. Bernie.
Try the so I've got a slightly different website for you that's more a Microsoft one, which is jwt.ms.
Oh, I didn't know this. Cool.
Now throw the token in there.
In there? Oh, that's right. I'll copy it again. Let's go back to Postman, grab the token.
And then you go to claims.
Oh, look at this. This is awesome.
Or yeah, XP.
Oh, awesome. I didn't know that existed.
There you go.
Thank you. That is awesome. Thanks.
Oh, JWTS stand for?
I wouldn't talk.
So what was the question?
What it stands for? Java WTS.
Oh, JSON web token, JavaScript Object Notation web token. I lost my chain of thought. Let's go back to that.
You're distracted by this awesome site.
I know. I'm just this is how talk should go. There should be audience participation and finding. Oh, that's just brilliant. Thank you, Bernie. Okay, what can we do with that? We're going to go back to here. Back to our web app demo and do this. So remember I was talking about system managed identities, the life cycle of the resource. So we go to applications and we're looking for ones with the name web. Refresh that. And we're going to have to talk amongst ourselves again for a minute, but whilst we're doing
Bernie, where does Alastair submit the security vulnerability to us?
we're going to go through why it's, but not just the rubbish API, what we have to do. And again, there's audience partition, mitigations, there's a slide. And there is, I've linked to it in my slides, there's a Microsoft back about the duration and what you can and can't do. You can't cancel these tokens, there's no revocation. and there's an element in that fact about at the moment, but awareness of that is very important. There's 24 hours of access on that token, potentially to something very, very sensitive. So there's other mitigations. I've obviously got open endpoints everywhere, but for the purposes of demo. But that was part of discovering what is and isn't logged.
And once the identity is deleted, it's not like you can go and revoke the RBAC or something either, because the identity
that's already gone. Yes, yeah. So that identity is gone now. If we go to, need to grab an IP address. Go to there we go, multi-cloud guru. Oh, multi-cloud guru that doesn't know his bash commands. Back to Postman. Back to our shell. And got so we have an environment variable in bash, just as our access token. We're now going to do a curl command. Anyone watching YouTube does have 24 hours of being able to read my secret password 012. Good luck.
I'll post it after the 24 hours.
They're just going to type out the access token.
Sorry?
They're just going to type out the access token first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe OCR it. I need to do the lazy grabbing of the curl command. So essentially, curl is the command line HTTP. For anyone that's not familiar with it, -s is just silent. It stops it showing a lot of control characters that have no interest to what we're trying to do. H is the header. That's in what your browser would send. And $access token is obviously our access token. HTTPS, blah, 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 blah. Key vault is our key vault. And the pipe to JQ is just to tidy up some JSON so we get a nice display. Ignore the bit after the pipe symbol. So essentially, we're going to send a query at the public endpoint of our key vault, and we're going to use our access token. Now, I'll just hit return on that, and we get a password back. Now, think about what we've just done. The only identity that has access to that password, well, obviously other than my owner account, which we're not using because we've just deployed this virtual machine. There's no Azure logon on here. The only identity that has access to that, you've just watched me delete, but the access token is still valid and still has that authorization to get there. So not only have we got something that isn't logged, we've got access that we probably thought we prevented for at least another 23.5 hours. And this bit, and that's really, that being a problem in the real world is totally preventable. You just have to know. And it surprised me. I thought that authorization would die with the identity, but it doesn't. This came back to me playing around and figuring things out in it. And trying to see what would log for the other talk that's coming. So back to slides.
Can you reduce the length of time of the token?
No,
Oh.
not. There's possibly an element of at the moment. There's no revocation. We'll come to that, and there's some links in my slides. So we go back to those.
And in Key Vault, there's no way to modify
the access level of that.
No, I thought about looking at that, and there's no way I can, because you actually see the identity. I haven't removed. You see, just the error you get when there's a deleted identities doing the IAM permissions. But taking that out makes no difference. The authorization is with the token. I did think of looking at that because the identity no longer exists. There's no longer permission.
You tested the other way around, where what if you just take the RBAC off before deleting it? Will that remove the token?
I can't remember if I've tested that. I'll do that and post it in the group because I've got it set up.
So is that in that JWT claim?
It must be, but I hadn't examined that bit carefully because I hadn't got the site report. There's more figuring out coming there. So you really want me to do the Splunk sort?
Doesn't matter from whom. Doesn't matter from which identity the token's been issued, as asserted that it can get access to the key vault.
So then it should be in that claim, right? Like if you open up that JWT web.
I don't, because we got that token before we'd given the permission to the key vault.
So it should exist in that token if that's the case.
How? Because
for that assertion, that claim should exist.
But the permission wasn't there when I grabbed that token. Remember, I got the token, then I assigned permission to the key
The
vault.
authorization should be in the key vault.
Yeah. Interesting exercise for the audience event. I'll go and revisit. I couldn't see a way of killing that access. And this is from that links to, I'll make my slides available. You can see it.
If you gave the managed identity access to the key vault, you're sure to be able to go to the key vault and say, take away that access.
It doesn't exist.
In the RBAC.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
You get that identity not bound or whatever.
Yeah. Don't exist anymore.
We remove that.
We go to our, sorry, I don't know what the time's doing, Dan. We've
Get you off from identity in there.
Yeah.
sorry? Okay. I'll post it. I'll post that. Yeah, roll assignments. I'll show the roll assignment. I'll wrap up. Where are roll assignments? There'll be a.
Oh no,
different.
we've got many more questions. Oh, there you go.
Oh, it's not the. It's on the secret. My bad. It's not on there. It's on the secret. Didn't apply to the. Oh, you can see where I've been rehearsing.
Oh.
Yes.
Just delete at the top.
Where's delete? Right. Absolute last action, Dan.
Did it just pass? Or
We
did
have
it
finished deleting. Finished deleting.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ah.
ACL.
Go and kill.
The ACL can resolve a label
That's right.
for,
But it still exists.
but it
Still exists.
Yeah.
So you can clean it up.
I know some environments that have hundreds of
Super safe ones.
yeah.
That's it, because I thought I tested that. That's interesting. Anyway, sorry, Dan. Thank you very much.
It's good.
Yeah.
We'll come to mitigations next time.
No one cleans those up. Unknown, they don't even have access.
Right, I'm just going to disconnect.
Yeah, you can.
Yes, we'll stop there. Thank you very much, all.
Before the next tag comes on, then
Oh,
we're going to reward the speakers. So thanks.
thank you very much. Oh, right, yes. Oh, lovely. Thanks all.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
That was really good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There is some PowerShell in the chat for converting that Unix timestamp.
Oh, who was that from?
Dries. Cool, I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Virtual chocolate.
Quick target. It's really nerve-wracking.
I can give him the chocolate tomorrow.
Now I don't need to share my screen, but it's coming up already.
It's coming up ready, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay, thanks everybody for sticking around. This is a talk on building growth patterns. So it's a little bit of logic apps and AI kind of mixed in together. So just about me. So I'm a senior integration specialist at Deloitte. Senior because of my gray hair, not because of my wisdom or experience, definitely not. And because Alastair kind of had a theme a little bit about running, I don't know if you noticed the profile pictures that he did. I figured, well, I'll just chuck up one of mine as well. So that's me running on the bridge to Brisbane. I think not last year, but the year before. And that, unlike Alastair, I prefer to run on dry ground, not through water. I'd probably drown if I tried to go through water. So there we go. The one thing I'll say about that is I've run the bridge to Brisbane for 4 years. And all 4 years, I came in within the top 5 in my age group. So just the old geezers. So well, very few. Actually, there were only 5. That's why. Okay, so who here knows what RAG is and what it stands for? Wow, cool. Somebody want to tell me what it stands for? Very good. Yeah, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Right, that's right. So I'm just going to cover a little bit about what that is. Actually, I don't have to because you just told me what it is. Then we're going to talk about logic apps, and then we're going to talk about how you can use logic apps to build RAG solutions with virtually no code. So what is RAG? So basically, it stands for, yes, I should have put the full text in there. It's Retrieval Augmented Generation. But why do we need it? Okay, so we're probably all used to the idea of working with LLMs right now. I mean, that ChatGPT, everybody knows you basically give it a query. It sends it out to the LLM, which is ChatGPT is probably the most common one that you use. And based on whatever wealth of information that it has at its store, which is probably stuff from the internet, it comes back and gives you a response, and hopefully an intelligent response, something that you're expecting. So we all know that works, or sometimes it doesn't work so well, but there are a few problems with that model. And one is the fact that you don't really know what the source of that information is that it's getting. It could come from anywhere, right? So it's kind of difficult to validate it. You also don't know that even if the information is valid and it's correct, is it correct now? Or did they pull it from somewhere where it was true at one point, but now it's no longer truth? And then the third thing is that it's very hard to be able to know whether you're bounding that in the context of your query, right? So if you are an enterprise organization and you've developed your own LLM and spent all the money and time to do that, obviously you have a little bit more confidence, right? Because you would have trained that model on the information that you want to share. But then again, updating that LLM to keep it current is very expensive and time consuming. So that's one of the problems with this model. So what Retrieval Augmented Generation does is it improves that by adding a separate data store of information for you, which will be your contextual information. This is the information that you actually want to query from. So it may be a bunch of policy documents or whatever for your company. And by introducing that into the mix, you also put the search capability over that data to be able to retrieve what you need from it. Generally, this is where we start talking about vectors and vector database, and I'll explain that in a minute. But now the way the query works is instead of going straight to the LLM, gosh, I have a hard time saying LLM. What you do instead is it first goes to your search service, and it goes and it retrieves context data, right? And this is the data that we now want to work with, right? And then it takes the query and that enhanced context and sends that to the LLM. And what you're saying now to the LLM is, I want you to produce an answer, but I want you to produce it from this data, from this context. And then from that, it can give you a generated text response. And not only that, it should also give you the sources. It should tell you where it comes. So now you solve the problem of what is the source of your data. You saw the context boundaries around that. And you also have an ability to keep this current because all you really need to do is update your contextual knowledge sources. You don't have to retrain the LLM to use that data. So that's why we like RAG. And that's what we look for in that. Now, to kind of understand how this works and how to demo, you also kind of need to understand just a little bit about what embeddings and vectors are. And I had to look this up because I didn't understand myself. I'm an AI illiterate, actually. But I found some good sources that kind of explain it. So one of them is that link there in that QR code, which is a pretty good source, and it's where this image comes from. Basically, an embedding is a piece of knowledge. It represents a bit of knowledge that the LLM has, and it is actually represented as a vector. What a vector is simply an array of numbers that represent that data. So that data is typically a string, but you can represent it as a vector in numbers. Why do they do that? Because the algorithms that do this search work a lot better with numbers than they do with raw text. So those vectors wind up getting stored in a vector database, and everything is really about proximity. So in that diagram, that's what a 3D graph, with each one of those little dots represents a piece of data, and they're grouped together according to some sort of relationship that they have with each other. So obviously that proximity makes it a lot easier and more efficient to retrieve that information when you're doing searches. And the use cases for it are basically you can classify different texts. And what is this? It's animal, mineral, or vegetable, or whatever. It's good for named entity recognition, which is basically recognizing proper names of things and the way they come from. And word similarity and analogy. So this is also helping things like your LLM to be able to translate properly. You say one word and it knows you mean something else that's similar to it. And used very often in your Q&A types of chat things with LLMs. And from that website where we got it, it's a great little video actually by a guy. He goes by Cooper Codes. I don't think that's his real name, but just explains a little bit about how embeddings work and vectors and how they're stored. So I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but I kind of it's worth the 5 minutes to watch the video. It's actually quite interesting. Okay, so how do you get RAG to work? So there's two parts to it. The first is that you've got to have a way to load that data, right? So we call that ingestion. And there's a few steps that you have to do. So you acquire the data that you want. You want this in your knowledge store. You have to tokenize that data, which is basically chopping it up into chunks, right? And then you create your embeddings for that, and you store those embeddings in your vector database. And that basically allows you to index all of that so that you can find it really, really quickly. So that has to happen first before you can use that data. That's the ingestion workflow. And then when you're actually chatting or working with it, you have a chat workflow, which kind of works in the sense that you start with your query from wherever that is. You have to then do an embedding. You turn that query into an embedding. So you turn that into a vector. And then you use that vector to go search in your searching and create a prompt. And then the chat completion is basically the LLM taking that and turning it into the English that you need to give an intelligent response. That data. So you can see there's quite a few things to do in there. Now you can do all of that in code if you want, but you have to be pretty, it takes a lot of work to do that. So this is where Logic Apps comes in. So Logic Apps are basically Microsoft's cloud-based workflow execution framework. Okay, so you can do these workflows can be stateless or they can be stateful, and that means that they're durable, and I think they can last up to 90 days. I think if you have a long-running workflow, but basically that's exactly what it does. It allows you to orchestrate a bunch of steps. And one of the real values about Logic Apps is that it comes bundled with hundreds and hundreds of different connectors that you can use. So you have connectors for your basic protocols, things like HTTP, FTP, SMTP, SFTP, all that stuff. You can connect to pretty much any Azure service that you would need to connect to and logic apps. You can connect to non-Azure Microsoft services, things like Office 365 and Dynamics. And then there's just literally hundreds and hundreds of third-party SaaS type programs that are out there. So you'd be hard pressed to find anything that you don't have a logic apps connector for right now. So that saves you a lot of time because you can just configure those things rather than have to write code to consume the APIs for those services. And they boast that, yeah, they can connect to anything. So they can connect to anything in Azure. They can connect to other Microsoft products and other third-party vendors. And then you, with the use of an on-premises data gateway, you can connect down into your on-premises systems as well. There's a number of adapters that allow you to do that. I'm going to fly through this a little bit, but basically it just talks about the kind of things you can do, workflows. It's made up of actions and triggers and connectors. And it has enough smarts and shapes in it that you can do just any kind of progression that you would need to do in the workflow. So loops, conditional statements, branch in, branch out, all that kind of stuff. Now, what's really handy in those connectors is that fairly recently, in the last year, they added connectors for Azure OpenAI API, actually Azure OpenAI, sorry, and Azure AI Search. So those are now available to you, and that's pivotal in being able to build a RAG type pattern in logic apps. The other thing that's really handy is they've also recently introduced logic app templates. So now there's dozens and dozens of templates in there that when you start to create a logic app, you can go from the template, and that basically gives you a jump start. So that it even gives you a wizard to configure the connectors for that template, and then most of the time you can use it outright, or you can tweak it to make it do a little bit more what you want to do. And when you go search for your templates, there's actually categories, and there's a category. And in fact, I discovered there's actually a RAG category now as well. It's even more specific than that. And you can see right at the top row that already you've got some templates there for being able to build RAG. So this is a great accelerator for getting going. Yeah, sorry, I forgot the animation that I had in there. Okay, so with all that, building RAG patterns in Azure. So there are a few components that we need, right? First, we got to have our LLM, which would be Azure OpenAI in this case. You need to have a place to store your contextual knowledge base, whatever that is, and you have many different storage options. For this demo, we're using basically blob storage, but I think you can use databases and everything else. And then you have to have a way to search over that, so we have Azure AI Search to do that. And then tying everything together is the logic app, which is executing the workflows for the ingestion and for the chat. And that logic app lives inside of an app service plan. It doesn't have to, but if you're doing logic app standard, like I'm using for this example, it will be inside an app service plan. And then all of that to get it to work needs to be in the same Azure region. So going cross region here is a bit problematic. I'm not sure. There may be a way to get that to work, but it's going to be much more of a headache. So for the purpose of the demo and running this example, it's better to just keep everything in one region. So now, if we go back and look at this this process that we talked about before, if we want to see how that's done in Azure, so basically you have your logic app as being the handler of your queries. You have Azure OpenAI as your LLM. You have the search capability with Azure AI Search, and then your contextual knowledge source, which in this demo is going to be blob storage. Okay, I mentioned about those templates before. So the first one that we're going to use is the ingest pattern, and we're going to do this one as an ingest pattern using blob storage. So this is what you get when you look up the information on that template when you're using it. We also have another template to create the chat process as well. Okay, so looking in detail at this ingestion one, that is the pattern there. So what we start is we have every workflow has a trigger that kicks it off. In this case, it's For this template, it's when a file is created in blob storage. Something's created there, that'll kick it off. You go read the data, you then extract the text from that data, and then you chunk the text. So this is basically creating tokens, right? And it's literally just an arbitrary whatever give it. You can tell it how big you want it. I think in this demo I did it for 1096 bytes. But you know, you kind of work out what you think works best in terms of the token size. And then using OpenAI, you go and you get the embeddings for that input array of tokens, right? And that gives you those vectors that you need. And then you map the vectors. Now in order to use AI search, you have to provide a schema for it and how you're going to set that to it. So this is just taking that data and mapping it into that schema. And then you submit it into Azure AI Search to index everything so that you can create it so it's all searchable. So that's all done for you in one workflow. And at the end of that workflow, basically that data is now in your RAG model, and it's available to you to be searched and to feed into your queries for context. Now, how to do all of that? I can't actually go through the process of doing that here because we'll be here all night. But where I got the smarts to do all this is from this video by Stephen W. Thomas. So Stephen's been an MVP for 20 years in the Azure and integration space. And this is an excellent source. He walks you through step by step how to do all of this and set everything up. And it's very thorough because I followed it and it worked first time. It's pretty amazing to do that. So definitely a good resource. He also, aside from the video, he has his own logic app that he's created from a template, and he's changed a couple of little things in it. So he's given you the code for that, and he's also giving you the step-by-step instructions written out so that you can follow. So definitely a great resource. And that's the task list, basically. Start by creating the logic app from the template, but you have to leave the connectors unconfigured first, because you won't have the other services ready. Then you create the OpenAI service, and you create the search service, and then you create your blob storage account. And then with all of that information, you can update your app connectors. And a big thing in getting all this to work is one that I mentioned before. Everything should be created in the same region so that you can see all of the services. And following on from Alastair's talk, managed identities are actually key to get this to work. That just makes things so much easier to use, because there are a lot of permissions that have to be assigned between all of these services to get them to work. And we create your managed identities. It's just a lot easier to do it, set all that up. And Stephen takes through all of that, setting all the permissions that you need. Okay, so these are the kind of permissions that you need, actually. So the storage account needs the storage blob data owner and blob data reader assigned to the logic app and the search. The OpenAI service needs access contributor from the logic app and the AI search, and also your user account, so that when you interact with it in the chat, that your identity allows you to do that. And then AI search too has a few roles also that have to be filled from the other services. So there's all that interrelation there that has to work. And then these are some of the configuration details when you're going through it. So that as you go through Stephen's steps, you'll keep track of all of these things, because that's how you configure the connectors and the logic apps to work. Okay, so that's the ingestion workflow and how we set that up. Then the next one, of course, is the chat workflow. So for that one, first you have a trigger, which is probably an HTTP call into with your query of what you want to ask it. You then go into OpenAI and you create the embeddings for that query, which basically tokenizes it into a vector. And then you use that vector to search in Azure AI Search to produce the data that you want. You get the content from that search. And then you have the chat completions, which is basically, now I've got that data. Now I'm going to format my response back to the user in a natural language way that they understand it, and send a response back. Okay, so much for the theory. Now let's see if I can demonstrate any of this to you. I think that's right. I have to kill the presentation first. Okay, you can all see that. All right, good. So this is my sorry, that's my logic app. I'm going to first show you the storage account. So this is the blob storage account that I have in here. I've got a couple of folders, and I've got one that's called input, which is where I've already ingested some data. I'm going to ingest a little bit more soon to show you, but I've already got 3 things in there. And these are basically documents for a fictitious company, Contoso, about what your employee benefits are. So I've got 3 documents already in there. I've also got my Azure AI Search set up in there, and I've got an index that's created. We'll use the second one, not the first one. It says, by the way, that I'm not sure why this is. It says I've got 55 documents in there, but you can see I've only got 3. I'm not sure how it does that.
It's the augmentation that's still.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe, or maybe somehow the ingestion flow, because I've run the ingestion flow a couple of times on the documents that are in there, but it doesn't seem to create multiple ones. So I don't really know why it says document count. Oh, yeah, chunks. It's counting the chunks and not the. Yeah, well, there would be a lot of them though, because the chunks are only like what?
You said 496 bytes or bits.
Yeah. Right, for the vectors, yeah, but I think this says number of documents in the search index. I don't know. The one that because the first one here is the one that that's directly from Stephen's version from his example, and it was only 12. It says there's 12 documents in there, and I can't list the documents because I've blown them away now. But there were only about. There were probably almost 12 documents in there, yeah. So I don't really know why that did that. Of course, I've got my that says logic app standard. I've got my OpenAI instance that's created, and I've got my logic app. So let's look at the logic app. So if we go into workflows. Okay, and we have a process documents workflow. So this is my ingestion workflow, and you're going to see it looks, that's my run history, the designer. If I go into the run, go into the designer, you'll see basically what very, very close to what I showed you in the template. So this has been modified just slightly by Stephen a little bit. And what he's done is he's basically, instead of responding to a document being created, it actually just lists whatever's in the flow. And then he does a for each over that, doing the same thing, reading the content, parsing it, chunking it, and doing all of that ingestion. Okay. So I'm not going to run that right now because I have it there. But what I wanted to show you is that with the documents that I already have, since I've done the ingestion, I'm going to first show you how we interact with that using the Azure AI Foundry, which is I think it's called Azure OpenAI Studio as well. There's a chat feature in here, so you can kind of actually query it. Now, initially, I have my chat model, and I've pointed it to my instance of OpenAI, but I haven't yet pointed towards the extra data, right? There's a place here where you can add your own data. So if I just say I want to chat, type my query in here and say, does my policy include eye care? Okay, now this is just going to use regular GPT, right? Which is going to go out to the internet. And as a result, we shouldn't get anything very specific, right? It's telling me, well, I don't know what your your policy details are, so I can't really answer that. At least it's not making it up, which is good. Okay, so what I want to do now is, and in here, I'm going to add a data source, and I'm going to choose to add it from my AI search. Okay, and it's got my AI search in here because I only have one. It's pre-populated, but I have to tell it what index I want. So I want this vector AI demo 2, and I'll add the vector search to this, and I'll select the embedding model. I've only got one in there, so I can add that. And I don't think I need to use custom field mapping. I'm just going to keep hybrid and semantic as a search type. That's fine, but I need to give it the actual configuration for it. Click next. And I'm going to use my system assigned managed identity for this to interact with it. Next, validating. There we go. Okay, so save and close. So now what this has done is this has added my Azure AI search into it. So now that data store that I have in my document should be available. And if I ask the same question again, I should hopefully get a more relevant response. Yes. So if you notice, it comes back, it says, yes, your Northwood standard policy includes coverage for division services, which encompasses vision exams and glasses. And it's even given me the reference. So if I look at that citation, it's actually going to tell me what document that it got that from. And if you remember, if we went back to our input, there's our document right there. So it's telling me, and it has retrieved that. So that's working really well. Now, what if I want to update this? Like if I have more information? For example, if I now go and ask it, does my policy include gym membership? Now, I happen to know that these documents that are in there don't list anything about gym membership yet, right? So eventually it's going to come back and tell me I don't have an answer for that information. But there's another document that does include it. So retrieve do not provide inclusion of gym memberships, right? Therefore, I cannot confirm if your document. So that's pretty good. It's telling me it doesn't know. But I know that we have the document. I just have to make sure I get the right one. I think it's called Perks Plus. Yes. So this Perks Plus document does talk about gym membership. What is covered, what is not covered. Hang on, there was something in there about gym membership. Yes, gym memberships. There it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to execute. I'm going to have to upload this document into my storage container. So we're going to go upload. And I wonder if I can just drag and drop that file. Yes, I think I can. It's Perks Plus. So you can see I still have the 3 documents highlighted that I put in there last time. So drag that in there and upload. Now that may take a minute or two before that comes up. But while we're waiting for that that index to happen, I'll just show you the other workflow that I have, which is called query documents. This is now the other workflow for you to chat. So I've been showing you doing the chat in the sandbox, right? Just because it's a little bit easier to see it. But this workflow has already been created. You can see I've had a few goes at getting it to work. I had to tweak a few things. This was right off the template, but there were a few things I had to change in the template to get it to work. And some point there'll be a blog post I'll do about that, what I had to do. But basically, you can call this by HTTP, and it does all those steps of basically processing your query. And we can call this directly from Postman. So here's my iCare included in Contoso Electronics. That's the same query I did before. If I click send on that, it should call that logic app and come back with the same result. Fingers crossed. Yep, it does. iCare is included and it gives me the references for it. Maybe not as nice as it does in the GUI version, but that's there. Okay, so let's go back and hopefully this has been enough time. I'm going to execute this. Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to show you in Azure AI Search. Remember, we had 55 documents. If I go into it now, it still says 55 documents.
That's because your logic app scans all the documents in the directory and uploads rather than looking for a change.
Right, but it should be, there should be more documents now.
But that's the, so in order to get a document into the AI search, you need to run that consumption logic app flow.
Right, that's
the additional document, but your consumption trigger is
does
everything.
Sorry, I haven't run it. That's right. That's right. I'm sorry that you just pointed out that that was the missing step. Yes, I need to actually run this flow. Sorry, forgot I hadn't done that. So I'll just
pick up the existing documents and add additional vectors for the additional.
I'm not sure that it will because I've done this a few times before.
Okay.
I don't think. Well, we'll see. We'll see what it is. Okay. Exactly. So if I just hit the run history now, so that's 746. Yep, it's run. Okay, so that's run successfully. So let's go through and refresh this again. Still says 55. Okay, well, let's see if it has picked it up. I'll copy that and execute that command again. Hopefully it's not going to make a liar out of me.
It's not instantaneous though, is it, Dan? Like it takes a little while to actually run that search.
It does, but it should it only took a few seconds though to execute that workflow. Yeah, it doesn't. Okay, so all right.
So you ingested, did you still do the indexing? Sorry.
Yes, well that's what happens is you the workflow submits it to the Azure Search to do the indexing on it. Unless it really does take a while. I mean, it's possible, I guess. Refresh. Yeah, it's possible that that may take, but it's a very small document. I mean, you saw it was only like 2 pages. So I would have thought that that would be pretty quick. Hopefully I sent it to the right index, but
the right storage account.
yeah, there's only one storage account, so that's it. That's the only place that I've pointed.
If the other one has more than 12 documents, maybe
That's probably yeah, that's probably worth doing. Oh no, see, it's 83. Yes, 83. So it's up now. So let's see if it comes back. All right. So
You just got the arbitrary wait. You don't know how long it is. How does one help? Just wait for a moment.
all right, let's see if it comes up now.
So you got 28 extra documents out of one document.
Mhm. The other thing too is I'm not entirely sure if this sandbox caches, or if it actually goes all the way to. Yeah, it's still not finding it. Okay, I might have to tweak with that a little bit. Sorry,
A new conversation.
a new. Oh, okay. So basically, I can clear that chat history. It still has my. Yeah, it still has my extra data in there. So let's try that.
It's not going to work. I think it's worth a shot.
Or the API.
Oh, I'll try the API. Yes, we can try that. Well, that's true too, because the chat workflow is gonna. Yeah, it's not available in the retrieve data. Okay, let's see if we have it here in there. Is gym membership? Okay, if that comes up with anything different. No, it doesn't find it. Okay,
Is it
so
in
my
the health file or says the perks interpreted as something else?
that's true. So I should say perks then. Yeah, maybe I'm being it's being smarter than me.
Yes.
Look at that. There we go. Yes, I found it.
Group
Very
debug.
good. Good. All right.
Engineering, eh?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Another question, was that your other prompt slightly incorrect? The one that you had through the thing, did you mention health?
I said in
Copy that prompt and put it in the sandbox. See what happens.
That's what I meant.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, because the prompt was obviously wrong. So, okay, so let's do that. And I would gather it would come up properly on this. Yes, remember.
The interpretation of policy, then the vectorization of policy kept it too distant away from the new information.
So it's interesting. It tells you a little bit something about how it stored those vectors then. So policy and perks are not synonymous. And as far as the
does the token size matter in this case? If you want to,
that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. And that would be something to experiment with.
because it's as I understand, the token is the cluster of the
Words. Yeah, it literally just cuts off like every 4,096 characters, and yeah.
But in that workflow, can you change the token size?
I can specify, yes. So when I do the process documents flow, if I show you in the designer, I have to remember which exact shape that it is. I think it's the chunk one.
Mm-hmm.
The chunk text in there. Yes, token size. Okay. I can specify it there. So that was a bit arbitrary to put that in there. That's what Stephen did in his example, so I just chose it.
And can you delete the data in the database and reconsume it?
Yes, you can. That's why I have a second index, because the first index was using a different set of data that didn't work as well for this. And so I didn't know how to get rid of it. So I just created another index.
Oh, I'm just curious to see how many documents you have now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask the same question because it could have also been the first time created, maybe all the data wasn't ingested at that point. So have a look how many documents you've got now.
Okay, well, let's refresh and see what we got. No, it's still 83.
No, I mean, if you create a new index,
Yes.
if you consume the documents in a new index, how many documents would you have?
Maybe you get a different number.
Yeah, I'm just curious because like that.
So do you want me to create another index?
Yeah, that could be good. Yeah.
Or you just run it again, and if it changes from 83, that'll mean it stacks rather than.
Oh yeah, or run it again. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there was a way to do this.
No, if you run it again, that'll give you the same.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
You mean you want me to run process documents again?
Yeah, if you run that again.
Okay. That's easy to do. Yeah. But remember, it took a couple of minutes. So I'll do that and we'll come back to it. Let me just make sure that it actually ran. So it's running now, but it shouldn't take very long.
Because that'll answer with those vectors added, and you get additional vectors, or they're just updated.
It gets faster each time. You keep on adding more documents.
Wait, if you go to indexes there, the second tab.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There.
Okay.
So
Last run to
so you mustn't be.
these yeah. So we'll come back and have a look at that. Remind me, and we'll see if that number increases after a minute.
So the difference between index is an indexer, as in
Index is a process that actually does indexing.
Yeah. Because you can train it and tweak it with all different kinds of. Well, I'll show you. I'll have a look.
running that process.
I don't pretend to understand all the details in here how it works, but there's obviously things that you can change. Oh, and it shows you when it was last run, but you have settings as well on it. There's different skill sets that you can, configure and stuff as well.
Yeah. So instead of using an indexer, indexers, that's basically instead of having the logic app, like collect it from the blob storage and then send it to the OpenAI search endpoint and do the chunking, you can have Azure OpenAI or the Azure AI Search knows how to go ahead and do a certain set of things, so you can get it to automatically do those things through that process instead. And it uses skill sets, and it's got a bunch of things that it knows how to do. And if you work within there, you're fairly good. You can do some custom things as well and add some custom skill sets, but otherwise, you can also use something like Logic Out.
Okay, cool. All right, so we saw basically, I'll go back to the slides now.
You didn't ask if it could give bridge to Brisbane entry. It's one of the perks.
That's right.
Intra API tokens. So from the managed identity.
That's right.
I wonder if it knows.
Okay, so just a couple of things to be aware of in this is that I've already mentioned about everything being deployed in the same region. That just makes it so much easier to configure it. Managed identity. Sorry, that's definitely a way to go with doing all of these permissions. One thing is, there are many different ChatGPT models you can choose. Just make sure that you choose one that has enough tokens for your region, because some of them have fewer allowances than others, and you can run it. So Stephen talked about that. He had to change from east to west in the US when he did it a few times. Just another thing, one of the things I had to change in the chat workflow from the template was the parameter that it asked for to for the OpenAI, the model name isn't actually the model name it wants. It wants the deployment ID, which isn't necessarily the same as the model name. But it was a bit of confusion there. I had to go through. That's why you had all those failed runs, and it counts for most of those until I worked out that. And then permissions again, very important.
Which, one question then, the managed identity, I think you gave it like configured a role or something like that on the storage. And you did hint at saying that your own identity credential was involved. If in that blob storage you had containers with containers and you had ACLs on your account not being able to see, this system wouldn't honor that because the managed identity has carte blanche across everything. So if you're contriving something where, say there's a container with redundancy list document inside, and you're running this, you potentially could see that because the account file, which has indexed and following the vectors, has the permissions over the entire vector landscape.
So I don't thinking off the top of my head here. You would have those documents separated in different containers, and you would have separate indexes created in an Azure Search for those different containers, and the permissions would be assigned for the index.
Okay, see, so you running it. Okay, then the index.
That's what I'm thinking how it would work. I haven't tested it.
That's good. Yeah.
But yeah, there should be a way to. You obviously do have to think about. Yep, probably is. Nope. So yeah, you probably just have to think a little bit about how you organize your data, especially when you're dealing with sensitive stuff. Okay, so basically what we showed is that we built the solution. You didn't actually watch me build it, but there was no code that I had to write. It's all configuration that you have to do, and you can get a working RAG model happening. And logic apps are a perfect thing to do that because they're designed to do workflows. And with those extra connectors that you have for Azure AI Search and for Azure OpenAI, it makes it so much simpler than having to try to write all of that in code, because that can get pretty hairy. So I've got a bunch of references here, and I will share this slide deck so that you can go and check out those resources. And I always have to put a plug in for the integration down under. We have more or less monthly meetings. They're not always the same. We used to do them the second Thursday of every month. It's not quite as regular at the moment, but we wanted to do that in a time frame that's friendly to Australia. And everything gets recorded and it's all up on YouTube. So if you go to the website, you'll see a lot of great talks on all of that. And then that's me. Any questions?
Where's your bottle of wine?
I bought myself the down Fahrenheit. All right. Well, thank you. Good. So the next month, I think it's next month. Yes, we have prom coming in. We get her for 2 months in a row. Actually, those who've seen her talk before, they're fabulous. So you really want to make sure you catch those.
Sorry about the title of the first one.
Which is what the architects, like 1,000 architects in a room, and
Yes, they're still there, right?
yeah, we wonder what her house is like. Yeah, that's great. The only thing I asked for you tonight, safe travels home, but if you could just take anything you brought in with you, like beer bottles, glasses, whatever, and put them outside, that would really help. Thank you.
Also, it took a name tag.
Oh,
Thank
yes.
you. But also just leave them on the table outside.
Yes, they can reuse these.
You don't want us to be known outside though.
Someone else can take them.
Back. How many documents do you have there?
Ah, yes, let's go look.
Good to see you. Yeah, good to see you.
I mean, you answered the question.
111.